Something is wearing the cat. Casey flung the screen door open and stormed inside, startling his girlfriend. Without a word, he paced through the kitchen. His attention blinked from the window over the sink to his chewed fingernails and back. His gaze sunk into the sea of trees that filled the land behind his mother's Colorado home. So no luck? Cynthia wandered from the couch to Casey's side and ran her fingers down his back. He shook his head and leaned against the sink. A long breath escaped his clutches as he plopped onto the kitchen floor. "I am so fucked," Casey murmured through his hands. "What is that supposed to mean? You'll find your cat, Casey." She let out a sigh. "I'm sure he'll come back. He always does." Cynthia wasn't wrong. It was likely the cat would return in no time. Diablo and Casey were an inseparable pair. The cat clung to Casey's heels and purred the teenager to sleep, yet still it was Casey's mother that invested in the feline. She also gave him his name. Casey felt uneasy. He had a healthy fear of his mother. She was talented in the art of punishment, and Casey couldn't begin to think of what losing her cat would entail. Just a year prior, after Casey's 15th birthday, she caught him sneaking out of the house. She made him sleep on her floor until his 16th. Cynthia slid her back along the cupboards and squatted next to Casey. He looked at her through his fingers and was met by smiling eyes. She peeled his hands from his face. "Relax." She gestured towards the screen door. "He will be waiting for you right there before morning." Before her eyes could follow her pointing hand, Casey was sliding the door open. "There you are, you little shit! I'm never letting you outside again!" Casey lifted his cat into the house and held him close. Cynthia giggled and gawked at Diablo's concerned gaze while Casey buried him in affection. She stepped closer and shut the screen door. For the first time, she noticed Diablo's beautifully contrasted eyes. A striking blue left and amber right swallowed her vision entirely, and she watched as the look of concern turned to rage. Casey contained his feline fire as Diablo twisted and curled under Casey's strokes and pets. The cat thrashed and hissed, and by the time Casey heard the thump of Diablo's paws landing on the kitchen floor, it was gone. Casey began to bleed through his white sleeve. By now, it was full night. The moon developed slowly over the Colorado wood like a Polaroid image appearing against a blank landscape. Casey spent a good while searching his home for his recently recovered companion. Diablo had to be hungry, Casey thought, and the cat's ill temperament was something that didn't sit well with Casey. But the young man was alone in his house with a young woman, and the distraction quickly proved too much. Casey led Cynthia downstairs, through the hall under Casey's mother's crucified Jesus, and into Casey's bedroom. Casey sat on his bed and looked to Cynthia as she already began to undress. Cynthia could easily note her lover's distress and knew all the right ways of comforting him. Her body moved with him in a quiet melody, peppered by lyrics of her whispers. As she rolled toward the nightstand to reach for her clothes, she cheekily remarked, "I'd do that more often if you had your cat's eyes." Casey didn't get the joke. His cat's eyes were only a faded brown. The couple was forced apart by a high-pitched roar that echoed through the house. Casey lifted his hands to his ears and grimaced at the sound. He realized now that whatever was in his house was certainly not Diablo. Cynthia turned to him. Her mouth hung open as if to ask a question, but all that came out was warm air. Casey responded to her silence. "I don't know." Again, the screech sounded, a vicious hiss that felt like it originated from within their own heads. Casey jumped up this time, struggling to fasten his pants. Cynthia followed, hunched and naked, as Casey grasped his bedroom doorknob. He swung the door open and just as quickly flicked the hallway light on. A hunched and heaving Diablo sat wretched under Casey's mother's cross. Casey rushed to his cat. Its eyes bulged and claws clung to the carpet. Casey maniacally slapped Diablo's back, a manic blend of burping a newborn and slapping a snare. He snatched up the feline and plopped it onto his bed, where its dry heaving halted, and it only began to hiss and spray. Diablo dashed from Casey's room, and left Casey's bed a war zone of cat piss and shredded linen. The boy stood helpless, jaw to the floor. "What the fuck is wrong with him?" Cynthia managed to ask as she finally pulled her pants back on. "I don't think that's my cat. We've got to get it out. Until then, you have to stay with me." Casey tried to sound confident, but a waterfall of fear fell from his words. "Okay," she moaned. Luckily, Cynthia was proficient in lying to her parents. The two lie awake, Casey with nothing to say and Cynthia with a bit too much. Casey turned, and his mind wandered from Cynthia's thoughts on plastic surgery to the faint scratching he thought he heard at his bedroom door. Casey hushed Cynthia. "I think Diablo wants to come in." "I thought you said that wasn't your cat, Casey." Casey knew, though, that only Diablo scratched at his door, especially late at night when he had Cynthia in his bed. And if whatever he found wasn't Diablo, then his cat must have been somewhere. In an effort to end his feline melodrama, he jumped up and opened the door. There, Diablo's dark form seized and heaved in Casey's doorway. Casey jumped back, and Cynthia darted out of bed behind him. The pair watched Diablo shake and shift at disturbing speeds. Casey sobbed helplessly as Diablo's back and legs snapped and cracked. The dark form wriggled, twitched, and croaked. Cynthia flicked the light on. Casey could see now, from the back legs up, Diablo was nothing but an empty sack. A hollow skin rug that moved with the momentum of its hind legs as they drove him in circles. Out from Diablo's orifices oozed dead insects and organs of the forest, entangled animal intestine and skin, and beak and hooves. Eventually, a pile of animal leftovers sat looming over the orange cat's empty shell. The two watched in silence, save for Casey's sobs, as the knot of decaying animal flesh collected into a bumbling ooze of some nameless, formless parasite. It looked straight to Casey, with two differently colored eyes. The creature slinked towards them, its base stretching into human-like fingers that gripped nearby strands of carpet to continue its sludge forward. The smell of rot and decay filled the space between the pair, and they backed away from the doorway until they could no more. With a shout, Casey lunged for his comforter and netted the parasite. Cynthia screamed. Casey wrestled the blanket, the two springing into one another on the bedroom floor. Casey slammed the mess into his drywall, and a dry snow fell on the both of them. The comforter began to drip and stick to Casey's skin, and the creature slid and hissed through Casey's grip. Again, Casey flung the mess into his bedroom wall. The force sent Casey's mother's cross to the floor. The crash made Cynthia jump, but moments later, she was allowed a sigh of relief. Casey emerged from the mess, sporting a coating of animal remains and drywall snow. He stumbled to Cynthia, and she held him close. Diablo's skin rested between their feet. Cynthia held Casey out, in need of some sort of conversation to rationalize what she had witnessed. She was met by two beautifully contrasting eyes.